This is a vacuum stretcher designed to increase the size of your D through traction therapy. And in this video, I want to go over 5 steps to be able to master this device to get you more results faster and safer. Now this device, in my opinion, is so effective, and I think it's led to the majority of my results, taking me from 16 to 20 centimeters in bone pressed erect length and 14.5 to 16.5 centimeters in erect girth in circumference, that if I could only choose one device to use throughout my entire journey all over again, this device would be it. Now, while I say that, I also want to say that it's if I only had the choice of one device. There are also other methods that don't use devices or tools specifically, such as manual stretching and squeezing. Now, personally for me, I have found a good combination of intense methods, such as a compression hanger. If I had to opt for an alternative method other than compression hanging, aka another device, and this was the only one I could use, this is still the one I would choose for the only device. I personally have found that I needed other methods that had a little more intensity for reasons I'll get to in the video. Now, I've heard of people getting results just with this device, which is amazing, but personally, again, I don't think I would have been able to for reasons I'll lay out throughout the video. So for me, I approached this journey in what I like to call a 2-step process. So on the one hand, in the first step, you've got stretching the tissues of your lat enough to cause growth, to actually manipulate the tissues to change in their size. And once they have, then I take that to step 2, using lower intensity methods for more prolonged periods of time. And this is where the magic of this device comes in. Since it is a vacuum device holding the glands at the head, being able to apply traction in many different forms, including a leg band, an extender, even using weights to hang straight down with or without a pulley system, it is an amazing tool that is super convenient. And in my opinion, it is the closest thing to the absolute best device. And if you do everything in this video perfectly, I don't think everyone's gonna do things perfectly, but if you could, this is honestly going to be one of the greatest devices that you can use for convenience and so many other reasons. But there are a few downsides that you need to consider, especially if you don't do things properly and you don't listen to this video and how to master this device. So whether you actually use a multiple arrangement of different devices to suit your lifestyle and circumstances, maybe like I have as well, compression hanging plus this device, or maybe you're on a budget, you just want to go for this device and you want to use manual stretching and squeezing, that's totally fine. Or you want to try use this as your golden goose, so to speak. Well, this video is definitely going to help no matter what camp you're in. So step number 1, honestly, like without this step, nothing else matters. None of the other steps matter. And that is conditioning. Now, how do we condition the tissues? Why is it even important? Well, this device, this method, no matter which traction method you use with the leg band extender or just weights, there is a tremendous amount of stress being incurred on the skin, not only on the shaft, but the glands as well, which makes this device and method quite temperamental, which is why conditioning is of utmost importance. Essentially, if you irritate the skin in the slightest way, if you incur even the slightest bit of minor or even major damage on the glands, you will not use this device because it's either uncomfortable or you're just going to make things worse. Conditioning will essentially allow you to use the device at all. I mean, to paint an analogy, not a perfect one, but imagine conditioning like energy that you need for the gym. If you don't have energy, you're not going to be able to hit the gym, let alone do anything effective. It is almost much the same with this. That is how important conditioning is. And with this device and methods in particular, like conditioning is a must. With other methods such as compressive devices, let's take the compression hanger for example, conditioning is still important, but in my opinion, I've been able to progress with a lot less conditioning. You know, it's a lot less temperamental, and in my opinion, again, it does a little bit less damage, especially on the superficial layers of your lat. Something that is going to help conditioning and keep the tissues like the skin as strong as possible and at a level that you can just continue to use this device for really prolonged periods to get the most amount of benefit is looking at this from a very holistic perspective. You want to make your body just an absolute healing machine. So there's not only causing the stress, also allowing the tissues to repair and recover, and the second step, which I'm going to get into in a second, and how to make sure that there's enough of both, enough stress that you're manipulating the tissues to change in size, but not too much that you're causing stress, making it so you can't even use the device. You can do your best and put in as much effort as you can to help the body out, right? Look at it from a very holistic perspective. The more you take care of your health and wellness and your fitness, you know, the more you stay hydrated, the better your sleep is. Just take care of everything from a holistic perspective, and your body will just become a healing machine. It will be able to keep up with more. All right, so just keep that in mind, and hopefully that's even more motivation to do everything you can in your life so that you could hit this goal even harder and get more results while staying safer. Not only that, things even like, you know, moisturizer, like the skin is going to go through so much with this journey, no matter what method you're using, whether it's manual methods, stretches, squeezes, all day vacuum stretches, in whatever traction method, compressive devices, the skin is like really copping it. You know, it's one thing for the primary tissues, manipulating them to stretch and grow to a new size, but the skin is not only going through that, plus it's copping all the external stress as well. So health, even moisturize. Now, the third one, this is a bit of a tease and a cheeky and shameless plug here, but this one is definitely something that would help massively, and it's something I wish I did in my early days of this journey, and that is infrared light therapy. Now, I say that this is a bit of a tease and a shameless plug is because this device is not out yet, but it is something that is coming to the Total Man range. Again, even if you take all the value of this video and this is something I recommend and you get it from a different place, totally fine. I want you to get the benefits. I want you to get the value, okay? But we will definitely sell these devices nonetheless. So it is a infrared light therapy pen. All right, so it's emitting very specific wavelengths of light. Now, there are some of the strongest correlations of this type of therapy specifically for the skin. It's definitely up for debate and how it benefits everything else in the body. There is just amazing studies for everything else, from cellular repair all the way down to mitochondrial function. Now, I say that's up for debate because there are studies that say that it does, other studies that say it's not really that effective, but when it comes to the skin, at this point in time, at the time of recording this video, it is almost a non-negotiable that infrared light therapy at specific wavelengths has huge benefits on the skin, at the very least, to increase collagen and elastin production. All right, literally what the skin is made of, and something that is most likely going to be degraded and broken down the further and more stress that is incurred, especially with devices like this one, like stretches, squeezes, even compressive devices. So if you're able to not only maintain the skin, you're able to execute and action these methods even more, for more intensity, for more time, but hopefully you don't get to the situation where you have incurred either minor or major damage. This is where this tool is going to speed up that process. It's going to speed up your downtime. I mean, if something happens and you do incur a blister, or maybe there is a burning sensation that eventually leads to abrasions on the skin, this is where the infrared light therapy, again, this is not the tool that you should be using if you're not focusing on your health and wellness first, and even, you know, moisturizing a little bit, taking care of all that. I really think that this is like the last tool to use, but it is definitely going to be beneficial nonetheless. So not only for maintaining, but hopefully you don't get there. If you do incur an injury, this could definitely speed up that process. And that leads me to the second point, which is actually how you're going to be able to condition, especially the skin, which is progressive overload. One of the key rules, the king rules of PE in general. So progressive overload, what does that mean? That is essentially just multiplying your time and intensity with whatever method you're using that will give you the volume. Now the volume, again, no matter what method you're using, needs to increase slowly over time. And this is for two reasons. The first one is your primary tissues, let's call it the fascia, the tunica, the septum, and a few others, they all respond to stress, especially the fascia of the tissue. I won't go into too much detail, but the fascia is known to be able to have the same tensile strength as steel, okay? It has so many different roles, but one of the roles is it's a protective tissue. So let's say you incur damage in the gym, all right? Fascia is all over the body, just remember that. If you incur damage at the gym, the fascia actually tightens up. You know, your decreased ability to move the next day, that's the fascia protecting the muscle belly so that you don't incur any further damage. Because if your muscles become useless and you need to, you know, get into a situation where you need to fight, flee, or freeze, and your muscles are toast, well, that means you're toast, all right? So the body's going to kick in biologically and, you know, tighten up the fascia to make sure you don't incur any further damage, even if that means limiting your movement so you can't. Now, something similar can actually happen to your lad, and many guys I'm sure have probably experienced what is called a turtling effect. All right, you implement or incur a certain level of stress using a certain method, and your flaccid size actually goes even smaller. Right? One of the tissues is the fascia doing exactly that, trying to contain everything so that you don't incur any further damage. Because again, this is a procreating organ. You know, if the body had two rules of life, it is survive, number one, and procreate. So once survival is taken care of, you go to procreate and your body provides you the resources. If you can't procreate, which is technically another way that the body survives long-term through DNA, I mean, to the body, if you damage the lad, it essentially makes you useless. So with all that said, progressive overload, back, long story long here. You need to progress in a way that you're using enough force and time that you're causing change. You're manipulating the tissues to change in size, but you're not incurring too much that you cause a protective reaction and have those tissues turn to steel and work against you. So you're almost operating in this small window. The day you start doing any methods to increase size is the day that that window starts escalating up, and you need to stay on that train as long as possible and in between that window. Enough, but not too much. At the same time, you also need to use this principle so that you make sure you're allowing enough and adequate time to repair the secondary tissues such as the skin. So you're conditioning the skin to tolerate more stress, more damage. Now, an amazing way to do this is not only tracking, like what you can't measure, you can't improve. When you track, you know exactly where you are, but I will say this, that tracking is not everything. Sometimes you really just need to sink into the body, be mindful, and listen to your body, listen to your lad. Because, I mean, what's on paper and what you did the day before does not take into consideration everything else in your life. You know, a deadline at work, the lack of sleep you got the night before. If you're due to do X amount of volume with your compression hanger and then chuck this on for 8 hours, but your lack of sleep increased your systemic stress, and then it just felt like, you know, you weren't the same. Hanging or any method didn't really feel right. It almost felt like you were pushing your tissues of your lad to its limits. You probably were. So that's where tracking alone can't be the only tool that you use, but you really need to learn, and it's easier said than done, you need to learn to sink into your body, sink into the tissues and think, like, does this feel right? Is this the right amount of volume today? Heck, sometimes you can actually tolerate more, but that's also a slippery slope. And I would honestly recommend, highly advise you do less than more, especially in the beginning. At the very least in the beginning, as you start learning what sensations equate to, you know, what problem or what feeling, you'll definitely get a sense whether you should do less, whether you should do the right amount that's on your tracking sheet, or maybe you can actually do more. But again, this is all going to take time and it's a lot easier said than done. But just keep that in mind. I want to say that tracking is definitely so important, but it is not the only thing. And that leads me to the third step, which is offloading the total volume to another type of tool, specifically a different attachment type. Now, imagine that you're wearing this and all of a sudden you've got a certain amount of volume to action on, you know, the next day. But all of a sudden the skin on the shaft starts burning, you know, the silicone or something goes wrong. It just starts feeling uncomfortable. But maybe this is your golden goose. This is the only tool you're using, whether it is with a leg band, extender, hanging, doesn't matter. You're still using the same attachment type. It's still holding your lad in the same way. So it's a lot more susceptible to feeling the same consequences if something was to feel a little off. And that includes, let's say for an example, your skin starts burning, right? And it doesn't even matter how much, lubrication, whether it's coconut oil or something else that you use, you can't get away from this sensation. Essentially, you just need to allow the tissues, the secondary tissue, the skin, to heal, to repair, and to come back again, so you can actually use this no matter what intensity or time you intend on using. And that's where using something like a compression hanger or a compressive device, the different attachment style is going to feel a little different. It's going to incur stress a little differently on the tissues, which means usually with compressive devices especially, you've got a lot more leeway for intensity. Doesn't mean you have to use all the intensity. Like, I really don't want people to skew this. Just like, people thinking if they deadlift in the gym, they got to go for their 1 rep max. That's not the case. All right, you probably do a deadlift every day, picking something up off the floor. The same is with, let's say, the compression hanger. Many people think it's a very advanced exercise, but I think you could use it. Like, advanced users could use it at crazy weights because maybe they need that device to be able to get any more results because maybe they're that far in their journey. But the beginner can also use it. It's just got so much leeway. You can still use it down here and stay extremely comfortable. Not just that, you can offload the stress that is being incurred, maybe because of your burning skin, maybe the glands have seen better days and the skin just needs some time to repair. You can chuck on the compression hanger, given your time and privacy is actually suitable to use this device. Usually a lot more privacy is needed, such as being at home or being stationary, depending on what traction method you use. So this is just another great way to offload that volume that you may need to accumulate for the day to stay on that progressive overload train and track, just to make sure that you're actually doing enough, but also not too much at the same time. And then as you allow, or you take that load off this guy, you're allowing the tissues to repair. Even if you're still doing methods, I mean, you might be incurring some of the stress using the different attachment type, but it's most likely a lot less than just using this device alone. And that leads me to the 4th point. I mean, this is totally overlooked. This is something I really wish I did in the early days. And that is using this device in a stepping process. All right, so what do I mean by that? When you attach this guy, depending on what protection method you use, there's, glands caps, tape, water protection method where you fill the chamber up with water, and that in of itself, because it's thicker than air, it almost creates this seal or this layer of protection so that you can incur less swelling and there's less risk of, let's say, blistering or abrasions on the glands. Now, depending on what method of protection you use, I'd highly recommend using something. You have to remember that this is a vacuum device. The vacuum pressure that is accumulated in the chamber is how it actually holds onto the glands. And because of that, it is changing your size fundamentally. You are inflating the glands, because just like, let's say a D pump, right? When you put yourself in there, the vacuum pressure literally pulls blood into the shaft, the glands, everything. That's how it gets you to inflate and get erect. The same can be said for this. Even though it's not covering your entire shaft and lad, you're definitely going to inflate the glands. Now, as you do that, depending on your protection method, that may in of itself cause a little bit of irritation. There may be a little bit of displacement. All right, so as your glands inflate to whatever protection method you're using, each one's going to function a little differently. Something may be off. And if something is off, hopefully on the off chance, hopefully it's a rare occasion, but it happens nonetheless, and it needs to be considered and remembered just in case. If you inflate into some kind of displacement that's less than optimal and you go straight into the weight that you normally use, all right, the traction, whatever it is. So with the leg band, if you have a certain amount of stretch on the leg band and you just go straight into it and there is the displacement, your risk of injury and abrasions or even a blister is that much higher. It is crazy. And nothing is worse than getting so much progress, so much momentum with this guy that honestly is like the closest thing to the best device that you can use. And then you get a blister. Man, what a kick in the nuts. Like, totally figuratively, but holy crap, it feels much the same nonetheless. You can't go on. Once you get a blister, you cannot use a vacuum chamber or any vacuum method for that matter, because you're literally just gonna make things worse. And you've got that much momentum with this golden goose, so to speak, and now you're just cut off. Like, you literally just can't use it anymore. So when you apply this stepping process It's more or less, you know, being as careful as you can be. It's being on the safer side, even though it's going to take 5, 10, 15 minutes extra. The amount of benefit that you can get with this and the amount of time that you can stay under traction, which is always, by the way, going to be the best approach. More time before intensity. I'm telling you now, like, this is one of the strongest recommendations I can provide you. Usually more intensity will lead to tightening up, or almost the protective reaction I was talking about. With more time under traction or pressure, there's less time for your tissues to go back to their former size, go back to their former state. The more time under traction or pressure, you know, you're almost giving your tissues no chance but to stay and maintain that new size and now heal in that newly enlarged state. So while it's going to take more effort in the short term, all right, so attaching this guy properly, all right, may take a lot more time than, let's say, compressive method. But once you've got it attached properly, comfortably, and you implement a stepping process. So you attach, you spend 5 minutes just sitting in there. All right, so you're obviously inflated because there is a certain amount of vacuum pressure you need before you attach so you don't slide back or there's no displacement happening just because of the traction applied. You just sit in there, start a timer for 5 minutes. All right, and instead of hooking straight on to, you know, your intended weight or traction that you're going to be using, even create a stepping process before just attaching and then the intended traction that you're going to use. So even go between that, even create another 2 steps between that. So one step is going to be just sitting in the chamber. Second step is going to be applying the minimal amount of traction, no matter what method you use of traction, so the leg band extender or hanging. The third step, you go to just before the intended weight, and then finally your intended weight. Now this really allows the glands to find their most comfortable position. And it's definitely going to allow you to listen and sink into the tissues to make sure everything is still okay. Because while it may take 15 minutes, for the 15 minutes, that will then equate to a nice, comfortable 3, 4, 5+ hours of staying under traction. I mean, depending on when you need to go to the toilet next, plus having the confidence of knowing when you jump out of this guy, you know, you're not gonna get a big surprise that's just going to put your whole journey on halt. And the lucky last but not least, step number 5 is having enough spares, all the way from the sleeves to even different size chambers, the O-rings, the valves, all the parts. You know, the last thing you want is for something to go wrong, something to malfunction, you know, the valve stopped working because there was debris floating up into the valve, making the valve a little less effective. If you only have one sleeve, I mean, you are one tear away from having your whole journey put on hold. Essentially, I would recommend having as many sleeves as you can, or at the very least enough so that even if you tore, you know, 2 the next day, you could still continue the journey, or enough, worst case, is you could order some more while you've got a few spares that you're working with at the moment. Now, I know that sounds biased because I'm obviously someone that sells these types of products. If you take all the information in this video, take the value and go somewhere else, I really don't mind. Again, I created this content, I created, you know, all the videos, I created this brand because it's something I wish I had when I began. Sleeves is in fact one of the things that started the brand. You know, it started quite organically, started creating content, and then guys started asking me if I was able to make or create, you know, a certain type of sleeve with a certain type of composition, and that's essentially where the product line began. With all that said, just making sure that you've got enough of everything so that you don't get yourself stuck. If something does happen to the device, you know, things do happen, sleeves do tear, valves sometimes don't work as good as they should. Even wear and tear just generally is a thing. So you just need to keep that in mind to be able to keep your journey as consistent as possible. I hope this video helped, guys. Hoping that this literally makes your journey that much smoother, your results that much faster, and obviously safer as well. This device can do so much, but it can also have a negative effect as well if you don't use it properly. So I'm hoping that you can really use it to get all the benefits without any of the consequences. As always, guys, I hope this video helped. If you want more content like this one, check out totalmanperformance.com, and for all devices and spares, check out totalmanshop.com. As always, guys, be the man you know you can be. I'll see you in the next video.